In less than 1 week, the sequester is going to take effect here in the United States, and that's going to mean that the economy is almost assuredly going to go back into recession, that the growth rate that we're seeing now is going to be cut off, that nearly 1 million jobs are going to be lost, and these cuts are going to be felt throughout America, all over the place, from airports to food inspections to benefits to those of us who need them the most. And you're seeing people saying, oh, President Obama and Congress need to come to an agreement to avoid the sequester. But the truth of the matter is that the sequester is completely the Republicans' fault. Back last year, when we were going through the whole debt limit crisis, where the Republicans were basically holding President Obama and the American people hostage to try and get the austerity measures and deficit reduction measures in place that they wanted, Obama decided that we didn't need austerity at that point in time. We don't need it now. But he decided to put the sequester in place, which meant that if they couldn't reach a bipartisan, common sense balanced agreement on deficit reduction, that the sequester would take effect, under the logical conclusion that no one would want just random slashes in the budget to take place, and so they would come to their senses. But the Republicans are so shackled to the Tea Party and to the failed ideology of deficit reduction and austerity that they, for careerist reasons, cannot go back and go back on those promises, or else they'll be primaried and lose re-election come 2014, come 2016, whenever they're up for election next time. And so the sequester is going to take place, but it's clearly the fault of the Republicans in Congress, and they are the only ones who can come to their senses, because the Democrats in Congress don't want the sequester to happen. President Obama doesn't want the sequester to happen. So the only people who want the sequester is the Republicans. And so if it goes through, you're going to see a concerted effort on the part, or you should see a concerted, united effort on the part of the Democratic Party to blame the Republicans for specific cuts that are taking place. And that's absolutely warranted. The Republicans' behavior is crazy. And like I just said a minute ago, it's because they are careerist politicians, right? They have a vested interest to continue speaking out on austerity and the debt limit and the deficit and trying to reduce America's debt. But the reality is that if you look at it, it's not really that big of a problem. And if you look at Europe, right now, Europe has been enacting austerity measures to different degrees across different nations. And those that have put more deficit reduction measures in place, more austerity, their economies have suffered the most. And people say, well, the United States has to be careful because if we don't do anything about our debt, we're going to turn into Greece. The truth of the matter is that the European Union screwed themselves, right? The European countries screwed themselves because they made a union, but they didn't make a full monetary union. So you have them using the same currency, but their economies all aren't linked, and you don't have the ability of the entire governing body to regulate the currency and do the necessary things that they need to act as one. And so the United States still has that full capability. We have our own currency. We are not Greece. We are not tied to the euro. We are not tied to the German government, to the Spanish government, to the French governments. We are our own strong single force. And so then you look at the other side of the equation. Where is our debt being held, right? And it's the majority of the U.S. debt is being held by Americans holding U.S. Treasury bonds, long-term Treasury bonds. So it's not in their interest to sink the economy. And then, yes, it's true, China has a good amount of our debt. But China, their whole economy depends on the United States consuming the goods and products that they're making. And so why would China, it doesn't make any sense for them to try and make the U.S. default on their debt and, bring the U.S. economy to its knees, because China and the U.S. are interlinked till the end. And now with globalization becoming more and more a factor in the world, that's not going to go away. That's just going to become stronger and stronger. So all these people who are trying to push the debt crisis and austerity measures simply don't understand economics, and they are getting scared by politicians who are doing it for careerist reasons and media personalities that simply don't know what they're talking about, and whose, as I just discussed, whose theories and ideas about the economy have been proven wrong and false very clearly in the last 3 or 4 years since this recession began. So the fact of the matter is that the sequester should not happen, and if it does, it's the Republicans' fault. And now, that's what I think you're seeing President Obama deciding to do. He's not going to go with the Republicans' plan to avoid the sequester, because all they want to do is put more harsh austerity measures in place, and that's going to hurt the economy even more now than the sequester would. So Obama's like, all right, fine. You guys want to play this crazy game of chicken? Go ahead. And then when all these cuts take place, I'm going to be able to sit back and be like, these guys are the reason why. And he'll be absolutely right for doing that.
Hi, everybody. Our top priority as a country right now should be doing everything we can to grow our economy and create good middle-class jobs. And yet, less than 1 week from now, Congress is poised to allow a series of arbitrary, automatic budget cuts that will do the exact opposite. They'll slow our economy. They'll eliminate good jobs. They'll leave many families who are already stretched to the limit scrambling to figure out what to do. But here's the thing. These cuts don't have to happen. Congress can turn them off any time with just a little compromise. They can pass a balanced plan for deficit reduction. They can cut spending in a smart way and close wasteful tax loopholes for the well-off and well-connected. Unfortunately, it appears that Republicans in Congress have decided that instead of compromising, instead of asking anything of the wealthiest Americans, they'd rather let these cuts fall squarely on the middle class. And here's what that choice means. Once these cuts take effect, thousands of teachers and educators will be laid off, and tens of thousands of parents will have to scramble to find childcare for their kids. Air traffic controllers and airport security will see cutbacks, causing delays across the country. Even President Bush's director of the National Institutes of Health says these cuts will set back medical science for a generation. Already, the threat of these cuts has forced the Navy to delay the deployment of an aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf, affecting our ability to respond to threats in an unstable part of the world. And just this week, the Pentagon announced that if these cuts go through, almost 800,000 defense employees, the equivalent of every person in Miami and Cleveland combined, will be forced to take an unpaid leave. That's what this choice means. Are Republicans in Congress really willing to let these cuts fall on our kids' schools and mental health care just to protect tax loopholes for corporate jet owners? Are they really willing to slash military health care and the Border Patrol just because they refuse to eliminate tax breaks for big oil companies? Are they seriously prepared to inflict more pain on the middle class because they refuse to ask anything more of those at the very top? These are the questions Republicans in Congress need to ask themselves, and I'm hopeful they'll change their minds, because the American people have worked too hard for too long to see everything they've built undone by partisan recklessness in Washington. Instead of these reckless, unbalanced cuts, I believe we should work together to build on the more than $2.5 trillion in deficit reduction we've already achieved. We should do it in a balanced way, with smart spending cuts, entitlement reform, and tax reform. That's my plan. It's got tough cuts, tough reforms, and asks more of the wealthiest Americans. It's on the White House website for everybody to see, and it requires Democrats and Republicans to meet halfway to resolve the problem. That's what the American people expect, and that's what you deserve. We just need Republicans in Washington to come around, because we need their help to finish the job of reducing our deficit in a smart way that doesn't hurt our economy or our people. After all, as we learned in the 1990s, nothing shrinks the deficit faster than a growing economy that creates good middle-class jobs. That has to be our driving focus. That has to be our North Star, making America a magnet for good jobs, equipping our people with the skills required to fill those jobs, making sure your hard work leads to a decent living. That's what this city should be focused on like a laser, and I'm going to keep pushing folks here to remember that. Thanks so much.